Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast. Today we are lucky enough to be joined by Robyn, the breastfeeding dietitian. She discusses both of her birth stories. She talks about how getting pregnant was so different from the first to the second experience, from months and months of trying to getting pregnant without even trying the second time around. She also discusses her breastfeeding journey and the difference between the first baby and the second, and how recognizing that her journey was going to be different than other people's was okay. And then she started to embrace that journey more. She also discusses how she prepared for postpartum better the second time around. Today's episode is sponsored by the Pregnancy Posse. This is a supportive community for pregnant and newly parenting people to come together and learn from experts. We've got dietitians, we've got social workers, we've got counselors, we've got pelvic physios who come and do guest talks for us. It's a place where we can learn from each other and learn from experts to support us in this journey from pregnancy to parenting. Welcome to the She Found Motherhood podcast, where our goal is to support you in the journey from pregnancy through to parenthood. We are so passionate about this time in a woman's life, and we want to make sure you have fun and reliable information you can trust. She Found Motherhood podcast is meant for general medical information only. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This does not apply to every situation. If you have questions or if you have received different advice, please contact your healthcare provider. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Hey, Robyn, welcome to She Found Motherhood podcast. We are so happy that you came to join us today. I would love if you would start by telling us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, thanks so much for having me. I'm super excited about this. So a little bit about myself. Where to start? I'm a dietitian, but I'm also a mom and two amazing little boys. One is almost 4, I can't believe it, and the other one 16 months, and they keep me super busy. I have to recruit help from everywhere just to focus on other aspects of my life, like being a dietitian, because I run the account Breastfeeding Dietitian, and it takes a lot out of me, but I love it so much because I'm all about educating and empowering mothers on their breastfeeding journey, however that looks like, just providing them with information to help them reach their goals. And so that's kind of the exciting aspects of my life.
It's true. I don't think people realize how much time it actually takes to put up that great content on social media, and how much, how passionate us providers who do it have to be around the topic, right? So thank you for doing that, because we share your stuff all the time and it is so amazing, and your graphics are hilarious but super informative. So thank you for doing that. It's really important to have good, high quality, evidence-based info out there and good reputable sources. So that's one of our journeys at She Found Motherhood, is try to get the good reputable sources out there so people can access them. So thank you for being one of those. But today you are happy to share a little bit about your birth stories with us. So I'm just going to let you kind of tell us as much as you want about kind of pregnancy. If you want to tell us about not getting pregnant technically, but like the process, that's great. And through kind of birth and postpartum, we'd love to hear anything that you are interested in sharing with us.
Yes, for sure. So if I could start even just before getting pregnant, because I mean, without diving into my whole history, when my husband and I wanted to have kids, we were not even married yet, and we were thinking of having kids, I was told that it might be really difficult for me to get pregnant for a multitude of reasons. And so when we were heading into it, we were already told that, oh, this might be tough. And it took us quite a while with our first one. I know everybody's journey to getting pregnant is different, and they have their own hurdles, and what's long for one person may be short for another. But for us, it was about 10 months of trying, and it took a lot out of me. I was really sad. And then, so almost kind of as if it was meant to be, we decided, okay, no, let's take a break, because it's just taken a toll on me. And when we took a break, that's when it happened. And so I was just like, oh, wow. So that was great. And then if I could even compare that first experience to my second experience, we didn't try for my second experience. I experienced one postpartum period and the next one didn't come because I was pregnant. And I'm like, oh, wow, okay. So I've experienced kind of both ends of the spectrum in terms of the getting pregnant piece, where it's just like it was really hard with the first one and then just happened with the second one, which was surprising that I could experience both ends of the spectrum.
And it's interesting, and we tell people this quite often is once your body has kind of done it once, it often, not always, but it often happens a little bit more quickly the second time. Now, that's certainly not always the case, and some people get pregnant super quick the first time, and it takes they're surprised that it takes, how long, but we know up to a year is kind of normal in a young, healthy person of getting pregnant, but nobody kind of expects that and mentally prepares for that. So it can be so, like you said, it can be so challenging with those month after month of kind of negative pregnancy tests or getting your period, and it's just kind of, it's really deflating. And then the opposite is true when you plan for it to take 6 to 12 months and then it happens right away. You're like, you're not prepared for it, right? Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And so it was interesting to say the least. But like both of them obviously very wanted pregnancies. And so we were thrilled with them, but two totally different experiences with the getting pregnant piece.
and once you were pregnant, how was pregnancy for you?
It was good. My both pregnancies, for the most part, I was pretty easygoing with all of them. I didn't get the major side effects that everybody says. In my second one, I maybe experienced a little bit more. Ones that I weren't prepared for that I didn't think would happen to me. I ended up getting hemorrhoids, but they didn't cause me any like discomfort or anything like that. It was just one checkup appointment. They're just like, oh yeah, these are there. And I'm just like, oh, really? Oh, okay. I really hope that doesn't make it a problem later on, but they were fine kind of deal. And so other than that, I kind of had easygoing pregnancies, which I'm grateful for because I've heard from many other moms that that's not the case.
Yeah, certainly. And hemorrhoids are super common and normal in pregnancy. We just don't talk about them
Exactly.
because nobody talks about their butts.
I know, right?
Other than
And so,
me.
yeah. And like, exactly. So it's like they came up and it's like that over there. And I'm just like, oh, okay. But they're not doing anything. But oh, well, like I'll keep an eye on them or like I'll make sure I'm eating like the right foods because like my dietitian brain was just automatically like, oh, yeah, okay, this problem, this is how maybe I can work with it food wise. But yeah, it was all good.
Awesome. And so going into your deliveries, how did you prepare for kind of deliveries? Do you have any favorite resources that you accessed, favorite books you read? Like, how did you kind of approach preparing for the delivery? Or did you prepare at all? Did you just say, well, let's see what happens?
Yeah, so for my first one, I was gung-ho for the childbirth classes. I'm a fan of virtual classes because I like to do things at my own pace and see things right in front of me, be able to go back over it if I want to, that kind of thing. So I had all that planned out to prepare. But surprisingly, a gift my husband got me, this wasn't even my first go-to, was a book by Ina May Gaskin, her Guide to Natural Childbirth. And it was all him who gave this to me. He's like, I read that this is a really good resource and I think you'll like it. And I read that book and I'm like, wow, this is so empowering. Like, this is how I want my birth to be like. I want, even though it was going to be a hospital birth and not like a birth center or home birth, like I want my birth to be like this. And so that I took that book in with me when I was in labor kind of deal. And it sat on my night table. It's like I didn't open it or anything, but it was just like my Bible in a sense, where it's just like that's going to like help me keep me motivated to do the birth that I want kind of deal. So I reread it again for my second one because I'm like, I need that feeling of trusting my own body to be able to do this, and just empowering me to get through it and do it the way that I want to do it.
Awesome. So how did your births go? Tell us your story.
Yeah. So my first one, I started having contractions early morning. It was like 3 a.m. or something like that. And then I lost my mucus plug. They think it was, but it was like super bloody, and bright red blood. And it was just a little concerning to me because I'm like, I don't know if a mucus plug is supposed to look like that. It wasn't very mucusy. And so I'm like, I called them and they're just like, well, come in and get checked and then we'll see. And so I did that. And then they ended up telling me to stay because I was already 5 centimeters. So then I'm like, oh, okay. So I guess I'm here. I didn't intend to come this early, but I did. So then I ended up laboring a lot in the hospital, and it was a really strange experience because a lot of the mothers there had epidurals, and so they were not moving around. I was the only mom moving around because I didn't want an epidural. Totally fine, but it was just a really strange experience where it's like I'm the only one in the halls, and all the nurses were like trying to come find me because I was not in my room. And it was just interesting. And then at a certain point, they transferred me over to the delivery side, and I got to have like a bath, and things started to kind of ramp up a little bit more. And then it was time to deliver. And then the way that it worked in the hospital was you just kind of got whatever doctor was on call, was on staff that day. And turns out there's lots of people having babies. And so when it was time for me to push, they're just like, oh, okay, the doctor's not ready yet, currently delivering one baby. Can you wait? And I'm like, pardon? I don't know about that.
Which, if you have an epidural, usually you can do. But if you don't have an epidural, oftentimes you're pushing, even when you're not trying to.
Exactly. They told me to wait, and like this urge to push would come on, and I'm just like, are you here? I'm supposed to fight this feeling? Like my body's just doing it itself. And so it was really hard. But I think what helped was my water hadn't broke yet. And so that was kind of keeping it a lot of pressure down there to that he just wasn't coming right away. Anyways, doctor got there, things were great. I was actually pushing for quite a long time, almost like 3 hours. They were near the end. I got slightly frustrated. My husband knew I got frustrated because the attending physician who was looking over the resident who was delivering basically said, okay, if we don't get him out soon, we might have to explore an emergency C-section because it's been a while. And I even kind of specified on my birth plan where it was like, I really don't want a C-section. So it almost felt like he was tapping into some inner emotions there to just birth him. And so when he kind of mentioned that, it was like, I got him out within 2 pushes. But I kind of abandoned all cues that my body was giving me. And then that kind of led to me tearing really bad. It was just a 2nd-degree tear, but they were like questioning if it was going to be a 3rd. So then I kind of had a rough recovery from that aspect after he was born, but it was okay. It was all good. He was placed on me. He's a little blue, and the cord was around his neck. And so when he came out, he was just maybe whimpering. He wasn't full on crying, and they were trying to get him to cry. And I'm like, come on, buddy. And I was just like wishing for him to cry as he's laying there on my chest. And there's like, okay, we're going to take him to go suction and see if that helps. And I'm just like, okay. And then the second that they tried to take him from me, he let out a cry just like that. And I was like, okay, never mind, he can stay. And I'm like, there you go, buddy. Thank you. And it was like the best feeling. The best.
So lovely when you hear that first like real cry, right? You know they're okay. Such a great emotion. Yeah. I have a picture in one of my patients her husband took a picture. It was our second baby together. And he took a picture like the moment baby came out, and babies are born blue. That's just how they're born, right? And then often they pink up within, if they start screaming right away, they pink up within a minute. And so I have this picture on our wall in our office of me holding this blue baby. The cord is still there, like literally just came out. And people are like, are they normally born like that? I'm like, yeah, they're born blue. Like that's what they look like. But usually they start crying and pink up right away. And so, but it's super scary when that kind of initial cry, like it kind of takes a little bit, but that's wonderful. I'm glad like it all kind of quickly resolved itself for you.
It did. And like, speaking of the pictures of blue, like my husband was taking pictures too. And I have one of him on my chest. He's blue. And then I have one of a couple of minutes later and the blue is gone.
It's once they start breathing and they can get all that, because it's a huge change too, like the physiologic change that baby goes through. It's incredible. So but wonderful. So so you had a bit of a tear, and obviously they repaired that. How did things kind of go postpartum? Any kind of concerns with placenta or any bleeding or anything, or did that go relatively smoothly?
Yeah, no, that was relatively smooth. I bled for a long time, like my lochia, I think they call it. And like at my 6-week appointment, it was still there, and like I asked about it, and then just like, yeah, sometimes it can take that long, and it eventually went away. But it's just like, if anything, with my postpartum, that was draining. I felt like I was not going to get back to my usual like day-to-day up and about kind of things because I bled for so long. Breastfeeding was a difficult start with my first. He was tongue-tied. And I had no idea what that meant. I'm like, oh, okay, a tongue tie. What does that mean? Like, what's gonna happen? And they were just like, oh, maybe it can affect breastfeeding. And I'm just like, well, do I do anything about it? And they're just like, oh, maybe. And I'm like, that's not helping me right now. Especially I didn't take a breastfeeding course prenatally. I took it in the postpartum period because I was experiencing problems. So maybe if I would have taken that prenatally, I would have been a little bit more prepared to know kind of red flags. But we eventually got through it, but it took a long time. We didn't find our groove till maybe 5-6 months postpartum, where we finally got the tongue tie addressed. And even then, it was a different journey than I thought it was going to be going into it. But once I accepted that it was different, that it was unique, that it was ours, and it's okay that it's not like everybody else's and not like this painted picture, like perfectly painted picture that everybody kind of thinks it's going to be. Once I accepted that, it was much easier.
Yeah, I often tell women, because breastfeeding, especially the first time, it's 95% of like breastfeeding parents, the first time, it's a struggle. Because it's a new skill that you and your baby are learning at the same time, trying to coordinate that together. And it's not like the movies put it. It's not like you whip your boob out and baby goes on and it's this beautiful, magical thing right away. No, it takes work and it takes practice and it takes learning about it. And it takes self-compassion and grace and humility and like all of that stuff to kind of get into that groove. And for some people, that journey is much easier and much quicker. And for some people, it's much more challenges. And there's other things that come into play, right? Nipple shape or, production or tongue ties or medical issues, right? Like there's so many things. So we generally recommend to people, if there's medical issues or we suspect there's going to be some issues, talking to a lactation consultant before you have your baby, optimizing everything you can before, and asking for help right away, right? If you're struggling, ask for help. And if you don't get your answers, ask somebody else for help.
So, because
Yes.
there's lots of resources, right? There's lactation consultants like yourself, you're a registered dietitian. So for most care plans, it would cover you, right? There's
Yes.
nurses who are lactation consultants. There's physicians who are lactation consultants. There's all kinds of people. And breastfeeding is a very specific training. It's not, everybody doesn't
Yeah.
have that training, right? I, as a family doctor, prior to breastfeeding my kids, knew nothing about it. Then my poor patients back then, I would try to help them and I don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, I recognized I didn't know what I was talking about. So I think that's a benefit, but ask for help, right?
Yeah. Exactly. And you make a good point too, though, that if you ask for help and you're kind of dismissed or don't feel like it helped you, because it's okay. Like there isn't one person out there who can help everyone. So if you don't feel like your problem was addressed, that to ask someone else. You know, we all have our quirks and our specialties, and we look at things through a different lens. And so it can be beneficial if your problem is not solved with that first ask to just keep asking.
Exactly. And that's part of advocating for yourself and for your baby and for your relationship. And that's an important piece. Do it respectfully, but ask for more help, and that's fine.
Exactly.
How did your second birth go?
So it was a totally different experience. So comparing to my first one, I've told people like, oh yeah, from my first contraction to him being on my chest, it was about 14 hours. And they're like, oh wow, that's fast. And I'm like, oh, it is? Okay. And then so I'm like, I've heard that your second labor is faster. Okay. And we had moved and now lived outside of a major city center. It would take us about 30 minutes to get to a hospital. And I'm like, I do not want to deliver a baby in a car. So
I suspect your husband didn't want to deliver your baby in the car either.
Exactly. And so we had a plan in place that the second I felt my contractions, I was going to go to town and I was going to labor at my cousin's house. She's basically like my sister. And she was going to be my doula, and she was going to come into the birth with us and like take pictures and be that extra support person. So I'm like, okay, we'll go to her house. That way we're close to the hospital when it's time to go. Because I have a feeling this is going to be fast. So first contraction woke me up in the middle of the night, around just before 3 o'clock in the morning, I think. And then, so I go to town, I drop off our older child who's just right across the street from my parents' house. They take him and we go to town. I'm laboring and I'm trying to remember the point at which they transferred me from like the laboring side of the hospital to the delivery side of the hospital for my first child, because I'm like, that'll be a good time for us to go, because my contractions were really like sporadic. Like they say to follow, was it the 411 or 511, where they're 5 minutes apart, 1 minute long for at least an hour, right? I think so. Something like, anyways, whatever they were, like I was told in the childbirth class, I'm like, I'm not sure if that's going to apply to me because I feel like it's going to be really fast. So I was just kind of focusing on how the contractions were feeling. It got to that point where I'm like, oh yeah, let's go to the hospital. And then the very next contraction, I was bent over backwards, couldn't move, urge to push, like I feel like this baby's coming right now. And they're like, are you serious? Like my husband's like, what? And then he's like looking to see if there's any crowning. And I'm just like, I couldn't move. It was like this intense contraction. I'm like, I need to push, like, oh my gosh. And they're like, can you get to the car? And I'm like, no. So they called an ambulance to come, and they took me to the hospital. And the entire time they were just like, don't push. And this, I felt like I was being told to not push forever. And that was, again, similar to my first birth, was so hard, but I didn't want to deliver in an ambulance. And so we finally got to the hospital. And again, I had to wait for my physician to get there. They kept telling me to not push, but because we were at the hospital and I had full faith that the nurses would be able to catch a baby, put them on my chest, and be able to assess if things were okay. I was just telling my body, yeah, it's okay to push. But again, my water hadn't broke. And so things stayed relatively slow, and that he wasn't just flying out in a sense. And then he was born on my chest, I think 5:30. So it was under 3 hours from the first time I felt the contraction to him being on my chest. And it was the most like wild, I felt like I didn't get a chance to like labor or bring on the like contractions of like what your body's supposed to be doing and all that. Cause like I felt like I just missed it, and it just flew by, and suddenly I have a baby on me. It was crazy.
Yeah. You have learned how to not push though. Sounds like
Right?
lots of experience in holding back, whereas most people struggle with the pushing part.
Yeah. And I wanted to push so bad, but they're telling me to not. And it's really hard to not push when you're everything in your body is telling you to push.
Did you, in your kind of reading or anything, did you ever do anything around like hypnobirthing or breathing exercises? Like what strategy did you use to not push? Because it's going against what your body is like yelling at you to do. How did you do that?
So I didn't prepare for it, because I was under the impression that just I was gonna let my body do its thing when it was telling me, right? I'm basing off my Bible of Ina May's Guide to Natural Childbirth, where it's just kind of let your body and like follow what your body's telling you. But I had to let them, like the nurse was just like, breathe, and I'm just like, I was like trying to breathe, and I would like let my body kind of cramp over what it was trying to do, and just I kind of breathing exhale out. But I don't know if that was right, but he didn't come. He waited for the physician. But yeah, I think it was really hard to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. How did your breastfeeding journey go with your second son?
Much better. Right from the first latch, I could tell that I had a whole experience behind me with it, plus a lot more education on it, because I knew I wanted to pursue that for my career. But his very first latch was a million times better than my firstborn's, and I knew, oh, this is going to be much better. And I knew from the get-go too that I had that education piece, that it's like I kind of knew all the things that I could do early on to support breastfeeding, just in case there was any issues underlying that could have been like a tongue tie. And so even early on, I had him assessed for a tongue tie just to see if that was a problem, where we were overcoming many challenges, but at the same time, I wanted to make sure, like me knowing my history of breastfeeding through a tongue tie, I was like, I don't want to do that again. So can you just tell me if this is there, just for my own peace of mind?
Right. Which is very reasonable.
Yeah.
How did the postpartum journey go for you? So because a lot of women don't feel that they've prepared enough. Like looking back, they don't feel like they've prepared enough for the postpartum. Kind of they read books around delivery and they do prenatal courses, but they don't actually do any preparation for the postpartum. How was that for you? And if you were to give some advice to somebody preparing for postpartum, like what would your top couple of tips be around how you could prepare for postpartum?
Yeah, so this time, leading up to my due date, I and my husband, we made meals and put them in the freezer, which was a super big help, because I find, it's really hard to care for yourself when you are caring for a newborn. And I'm a firm believer in that we really need to kind of mother the mother. And so during that period, and so creating meals that were already prepped, where my husband could still go to work and come home, and we've just taken a meal out. When people were asking what gifts to bring. We already had so many things from our firstborn that we just said, bring meals, bring handheld snacks, bring things for my toddler that, you know, would keep him busy, rather than like an outfit for the baby in a sense. That was a lot of help, because I think that's one thing we don't do is ask for help.
I agree with you.
We think we need to do it all. And for this second experience compared to my first, I really dropped that, what's the word? You know, that stigma of asking for help, where it's just like, no, you know, they're offering a hand, I'm going to take it. Yes, make me meals, make me snacks, buy things for my toddler, or even if you want to come hang out and visit the baby, like play with my toddler while I'm feeding the baby or something like that. You know, that is also a huge help. So just, yeah, I think the overarching concept in the postpartum period should be ask for help.
Now I have a question for you. Being a dietitian, I suspect that you, I don't want to make assumptions, but that you probably have a certain way that you like to intake your nutrients. Did you actually give people recipes when you asked them if they offered to cook you meals? Like, did you have like a repertoire and you just like emailed it to them or something?
That would have been super helpful. I didn't, but I feel like it was mostly like all family members or friends of family that knew me very well and knew I was a dietitian. And so what they brought us, it was all nourishing foods. Like I had an aunt where she had a frozen turkey carcass left over. She boiled it down and made bone broth and made me some turkey soup. She also made me some like energy bites that, you know, they were like oat, whole food based kind of deal, because she knew that, you know, I want things with all the nutrients in it. And so I think people kind of just knowing me and knowing who I am, they kind of knew what I would want. But recipe list would have been a really good idea.
I was thinking you can make like a Pinterest board and just share it. But I was creeping on your website today in preparation, and you have some great little recipes on there.
Thank you.
Like a couple great recipes. So if people are needing some ideas to bring over to their postpartum friends, that would be they look pretty simple. A great kind of place to start, right?
Yeah, they're simple, they're handheld, which is a big bonus, because I feel like you need to grab and go with breastfeeding mothers, or even just any mom in the postpartum experience. And so they're handheld, easy to make, simple ingredients, and in bulk, where you can just keep them in the freezer and pull them out when you need it. Exactly. So they're a really good gift idea.
So talking about your website, we'll just segue to that right now. So breastfeedingdietitian.com is your website. You also offer services both so you are a registered dietitian in Saskatchewan, but you can treat people, or you can consult with people anywhere other than BC and PEI, I think you were saying. Is that correct?
Yes. So I'm limited to Canada, and then cross-provincially, it's dependent on different provinces. I can't practice in BC or PEI, but I can everywhere else, because either my Saskatchewan license permits me to practice there, or I purchased a license to practice in that province. And so I can, because I do online consults, I can see everybody across Canada.
And you have a couple of great options too. You've got like a quick consult and then a full consult as well. So there's like different options. So if people just have a quick question, they can kind of book that with you. But if they want a longer, more in-depth thing, you offer that service as well.
Yeah, so the quick Q consult's really kind of like if you want to know about like your prenatal supplement, or if there's anything that you can be doing nutrition wise to keep your energy up, or like just like quick kind of information discussion things that you can do for yourself. And then my full consults are more so you're experiencing a problem and you want my help to solve it.
Awesome. And then I normally ask people, so I'm going to ask you this question that I normally ask people right now. How did having children change your trajectory in terms of your professional life?
Yeah, so before I had kids, I knew I wanted to work in lactation or breastfeeding because I took a course when I was becoming a dietitian called Nutrition Through the Life Cycles. And we talked about breastfeeding there. And this kind of like seed was planted in a sense where I knew, oh, this is the area I want to work in. The passion behind it was really born once I actually was living it, breastfeeding, experiencing it firsthand, how it does not come naturally. Like they tell you, oh, it doesn't come naturally, you know, like it can take some work. But unless you actually live it and are putting in the work, you don't fully understand, you know, how hard it actually can be. And so that's when like the passion was lit, was just, oh, I want just moms to know everything about breastfeeding to help them get through and reach their goals. Because I feel like I just, from my own personal experience, that I wasn't prepared and I didn't have the whole picture. You know, I had some information about how great breastfeeding is and, oh, you might experience difficulties and here's like some few general points. But I felt like I could have known so much more. And so that was really the driving force between me starting Breastfeeding Dietitian, is to just get that information in the hands of moms so they can do it themselves. You know, and that support resource for them.
And is that when you started working towards becoming an IBCLC, so a certified lactation consultant?
Yeah, so I took, to do that, my healthcare background as a dietitian qualifies me for a certain pathway that all I need to do is take my lactation education and then get a certain number of practical hours, 1,000 practical hours. And so I took that lactation education prior to starting Breastfeeding Dietitian. And then I am now working towards getting those practical hours by helping moms in my consults.
Awesome. And people can actually work with you as a almost certified lactation. So get the lactation advice, but also be able to use their benefits for a registered dietitian, because you're doing it with the lens of a registered dietitian. Is that correct?
Yeah. So as a registered dietitian, you know, we follow something called the nutrition care process, where it's kind of like a big list of all these nutrition problems that could be going on. And so one of those nutrition problems is breastfeeding difficulties. And so I help moms through breastfeeding difficulties as a dietitian with my lactation specific education, which qualifies you, if you have dietitian services covered on your insurance, to use that. And the more you use it, the more it's going to get out there that these services are needed. And then the more coverage can happen.
And part of the reason that I'm asking you all these questions is because we are so passionate about asking for help. And there are many different places you can ask for help. And oftentimes people are hesitant to ask for lactation. So to get a lactation consultant appointment, because it is expensive, right? Getting that support is expensive. But if you have coverage, you can often use it through different ways. So there's many different professions that can be certified as a lactation consultant. So dietitian, nurses, osteopathy, like physicians. And so if you have coverage, you can access that care through those avenues. So it's really important to recognize that when you're looking for care. If you have coverage, you can actually get a lot of extra support with lactation. For those of us without coverage, well, that's a crummy situation, but often physicians are covered as well. So there's often, in most major centers anyways, there are physicians who are breastfeeding medicine specialists who can help you out if you don't have coverage. So ask for that type of help if you have it. and
Yes,
in the time of
exactly.
COVID, which we're in, and it will, I hope, continue. There's a lot of online support as well. If you're in a smaller, more rural center, you can still access that help through online stuff, which is, I think, been one of the really good benefits of COVID is we're actually, people who live more rurally are able to get more supports because everything has gone online now. And so we're just all used to it. So I think that's one of the, if we're going to look for a COVID silver lining, breastfeeding rates are up and
Yes.
rural care is improved.
Exactly.
So where can people find you? And we'll put all of this in the show notes, but give us a quick rundown of all your, where people can get a hold of you.
Yes. So I am most easily to get a hold of on Instagram through my Breastfeeding Dietitian account. Although I will admit my DMs are pretty overwhelmed there. So you can email me that I have linked on my Instagram account. You can also find me on Facebook, the same handle. And as well, you can just go to my website for any and all information regarding me and my business.
Yeah. And I think it's really important to remember that most of the services we provide on Instagram and stuff are kind of free and they're just scratching the surface. So this is just the basics of it. So if you want to actually go in depth and look into this, it's really important to kind of reach out and book one of those online consults and you'll get so much information. We've done a few podcasts with dietitians and I am just blown away with, and I'm a trained physician, how much I do not know. Right. And how many amazing tips and how much knowledge there is out there. So like everybody who's pregnant, if you have extended benefits, reach out to a dietitian. If you're preparing for postpartum, reach out to a dietitian. If you're struggling with your toddler not eating, reach out to it. There is such a wealth of information out there that all of these accounts are just scratching the surface because we all have other jobs as well. And this is not our primary role, but it's, so reach out to a dietitian, everybody. Public service announcement.
Thank you.
Awesome. But they can do that. They can book online consults with you on your website as well. Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. I've loved this so much chatting with you. So thank you for having me.
Yeah. And we look forward to continuing to share all of your amazing Instagram knowledge.
Well, thank you for the support. And I also love everything that you guys put out on Instagram and share what I can. And so thank you.
Awesome.
If you enjoyed listening, please head over to iTunes, subscribe so you don't miss any new episodes, and please leave us a review. If you found this helpful, take a screenshot and share on social to help other mamas access this information. Check out our website at www.shefoundhealth.ca and join our community. We send out weekly emails and release new content focused on this incredible time in your lives. We'll also be sharing exclusive offers, so be sure not to miss out.